that was always the hope and the goal, that we were going to make a film about the end of a community by building a very strong community. I'm Athina Rachel Tsangari, and I'm the director, co-writer of Harvest.
And we were just saying before the interview started that I had the pleasure of interviewing you way back in 2011 for Attenberg. You took an inordinate amount of time, given that you were in the middle of your festival screening there, to speak to me. So for anyone, I would refer you back to that interview because we go in depth into what brought you to filmmaking and your history. So I want to dive straight into.
You still have it on director's notes?
Yes, it's still there.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's still there. So it's available for everyone, and I'll link to it in this interview.
It's such an archive, director's notes.
Thank
I mean,
you.
I actually visit director's notes quite a lot,
Oh, that's fantastic.
just because it's almost like an archaeological site, because you've been doing it for so long. And yeah, congratulations for keeping it up.
Thank you. Yeah, we hit our 20th year next year, next June. So we'll have to plan something special for that. But yeah, as you said, we're here to talk about your new film, Harvest. And so, for anyone who hasn't seen the film yet, given the fact that it's only just coming out now in the UK, how would you describe the film? Because there are so many themes that you deal with in the film, kind of the encroaching of modernity, capitalism, betrayal. So, how would you describe the film?
It's a week where everything changes in this small community, in this undefined time and place, where the shit hits the fan basically, and everything disappears.
Mm.
And it's a quite hallucinatory week for all sorts of reasons that it's exciting for the audience to discover.
Mm. I would say, watching the film, and I rewatched it last night in preparation for today. There's a real sense of place, and especially the way that you bring us into the film. As our lead is interacting with nature and such. So, given the fact that I know that the original book was originally set in England, and you moved to Scotland, what prompted that decision?
It was a quite instinctual decision from the very beginning. I guess it also had to do that Rebecca O'Brien, our main producer on the ground, is Scottish. And I knew that it was important to have at least one of our team be from the place where we shot. And I was not going to ever make a period film. And there is the predominance of sort of like the English countryside in the English period film that I want to get away from. And the ruggedness and the kind of freedom of the landscape in second the lowlands where they meet the ocean. And it's in a strange way, it's a landscape that, in a strange way, and that's a very personal connection, it reminds me of the island where I live. So there was something wild about it. Also the people. I don't think we would have made it in a place where lots of films were being shot, and we really found a community over the 2 years that we kept going back. We found a community that slowly became the characters of the film.
Yeah, because you don't use there aren't extras in the film. They're the
No.
people who are in the film, I suppose outside of the stars who came in, they're of the land.
Yeah. They're all real people, farmers and craftspeople. And for example, Maya Boniwell, who plays Lizzie, she's a girl from the village who came to our call that we did in the village high school. And the moment that Shaheen Baig, our casting director, and I saw her, we just knew it was going to be her. After actually having auditioned in England and in Glasgow for this little girl, with sort of like professional kid actors. There was again, they're just real, and they just belong in that landscape and in that land. And they also, their ancestors um, had, were part of that movement of exiles, who then went to America or they moved to England or so yeah, it just felt the right thing to do. And also I never work with extras. Yeah, I don't ever think in terms of this dreadful expression like background.
Yeah.
They're always foreground. And we rehearsed all together. There was no separation between main cast and secondary cast. We didn't use these words.
Yeah, because you've described it, and including the crew as well, kind of that you were like almost like a theatre troupe together, and that you were all embedded in there
Hmm.
throughout the shooting, actors and crew alike, which is fantastic, and that
I
people.
mean, cast, Harry and Caleb and Arinza and like everyone, Talisa, Rosie, uh, everyone was, because we were shooting so fast and because we had to seamlessly, immediately move from the one scene to the other, they would carry like apple boxes and grip equipment and help in every way they could.
Mhm. And talking about the way it was shot, because it's shot by Sean Price Williams, who if I'm right, did you first work together on Trigonometry, or did you have a relationship that predated Trigonometry?
We had worked on a commercial together.
Hmm.
That was it was a very long commercial that we did in Greece, um, for a resort that belongs to a good friend and executive producer of all of my films. Belongs to his family. It's called Costa Navarino, and it's an idyllic place that we gather to, make this sort of like film in a way about the area. And so we just, that's where I met Sean, who was actually staying at the resort and as a guest of Christos. And we immediately started nerding about cinema. Um, and then we worked together, and there was a beautiful connectedness between us. He doesn't like to talk, I don't like to talk. So it was a very intuitive way of working with each other. So when I was hired to do trigonometry, I knew he was the right one because of the tactile way. He's very fast, he's very tactile. I don't have patience to wait for hours of lighting because I shoot in a very immediate, um, very direct sort of way with a cast. So yeah, it was a beautiful collaboration, and then I knew immediately that Harvest would be a great film for the two of us to work together. And I tend not to really work with the same cinematographer twice, but here's the exception.
And the way that you shot on Trigonometry, because it was a lot of long sequences, that's something that translated directly to Harvest. And also, we were talking about the landscape earlier, and being in Scotland, that kind of allowed you this kind of 360, you could point the camera anywhere kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's why we chose. I mean, trigonometry was more like a chamber, you know, drama, comedy, dramedy, I guess you would say it in television. Um, and that's where I met Talisa too, Talisa Teixeira, who I completely adapted Mistress Beldam for her, um, that character. Yeah, it was like a family. It was almost like making a family film. That was always the hope and the goal that we were going to make a film about the end of a community by building a very strong community. So the landscape really inspired all of us because we could really choreograph everything on that. It was almost like working in a studio.
Yeah.
It was just for us. It was given to us by Lupi Mall, who is the owner, but he was such a gracious host. He basically gave us all of this land and the steadings and said, do it, do what you may with it.
Fantastic.
So, how many places, and also there's the innocence, the innocence of all the people who were involved in it, who, didn't do it to be in the movies or to make money, for any kind of vanity or profit. They really did it to be part of this wild troupe, that we assembled.
Yeah. And as you did with Atterberg, you shot on 16 millimeter again, the dying dinosaur, as you've described it several times. And you know, aside from I suppose kind of the texture, what is it about 16 that and shooting on film that you love? Is it kind of part of the rhythm of the way that it concentrates minds? Kind of what is it that
First of all, it looks gorgeous. No digital film can replicate that, no matter how much we try or we put filters or. So that is something that's unparalleled and inimitable. But also, yes, the ritualistic aspect of it, the fact that we all actually hear the film going through the gate, and we know, and we hear the shutter, and we know that it's a very precious, very expensive material that we have very little of in small independent films. So everyone gets into this very respectful trance, so because it is a trance, because you know that you have maximum 3 or 4 takes and that's it. And also because of the way I block and shoot each scene, no one really knows when they're on or off camera, because we don't stop for specific close-ups or shot reaction shot construction. We don't do that.
yeah,
So
because you don't shoot coverage, do you? Or at least you
in
didn't
the
on
end,
this.
there
Yeah.
is, it's because every time, and that's the beauty of working with Sean, because in an unspoken way, we know that the next one, again, without really having to spend time blocking, we just know that each take has to be a bit different. So in the end, all of this editing happens from these, 3 or 4 variations on this choreography, because it's always a choreography. There is always a ritualistic movement of bodies and eyes and hands in space.
Because yeah, I read an interview and you were speaking in that interview specifically about the barn burning scene and the the plan of shooting that as one, but then
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I don't ever read um, any of my interviews and any of the reviews for a long time after I make a film. So I don't actually remember what I have said before.
fair. But well, they were saying that that there had been a plan that the barn burning scene would mainly be kind of like a oneer, but that when you came to the edit, that didn't work. But because of the way that you had shot it in these various variations, that
That's true.
you then could
That's true.
construct it that way.
Also, I think I was smart about it. Although, in this film, there was always going to be the drone shot There's one for a specific reason because there was a purpose for it. And actually, we're the first ones who, I think, from what we heard, that the first ones who actually put a 60 millimeter camera on a drone while it was, running with a magazine and everything. Crazy, mad. We had 3 takes of that. And then there was always going to be, from the beginning of how I imagined it, there was going to be this tracking shot. There was going to be a oneer, connecting and introducing everyone while the barn was burning. So we rehearsed it and we're so happy with how it went. In the end, it was like hugging each other, especially when you make a modest film and you do something like that, which is extraordinary. And in another film, that it would probably, to get it right, would have taken whatever, 40 takes, or you hear 80 takes from some of my male colleagues. And then I think we did it 6 times. 3 were bust and 3 were full. And we did it, and it was beautiful. But it was too beautiful. It was too stylized. It was too. So thank God I had asked Ben Rivers to come to be, to sort of like be shooting in the opposite way, so sort of like handheld and long lenses in the Ben Rivers way. So in the end, thank God he was there, because it was like a combination between Ben Rivers and Sean on the dolly. And in a strange way, it's as if I had planned it this way, but I had not. So it's nice to actually allow yourself to not be dogmatic about stuff like that, and especially in the edit, to just really hear and sense what the film wants. Not what the director or the editor or the producers want,
And
but
not
what the
impose.
film wants.
Yeah.
And it's asking you to, and you have to listen.
This, if I'm correct, was the first time that you've worked with a choreographer, Holly Blakey.
Yeah.
And so, was Holly involved in, like, for instance, we just spoke about that scene with the barn burning, but then there's obviously, the ritual, which is kind of what you think of as more, typical choreographed scene. But was Holly across kind of a lot of the other scenes as
Holly
well?
was across everything. And it's the first time that I actually had the choreo. I do rehearsals and I choreograph myself. Everything up until Harvest, where I knew that and also I wasn't interested in just doing it myself with all these people. And this very specific also, the dance itself, it had to be studied. We discussed a lot what it was going to be, how traditional, how contemporary. It was going to be this kind of like punk kind of Kaylee. And I was so lucky to be in London actually when we were casting. And Nathan Parker, who is a friend of hers, our production designer, told me, you have to meet Holly. You have to see her show, which is actually, it was happening that night. So I had not seen her work. I saw it. I was blown away. I asked her right and there. She said yes. And then she came and she did what I normally do myself in the first week or two of rehearsals. She danced the film. So in a way, she loosened everyone up, main cast, all the villagers. Everyone was just dancing, for that scene, but actually, and that's why I always have at least one dance scene in each one of my films, because this is the way to really, the actors really get together, loosen up, discover the characters in a very physical way. And then lots of unnecessary words go out the window. So she did not just like the dance scenes, she basically did the movement study for lots of the scenes. And she was there, she was on set. She was always there. I would always turn and she would be there. And every time I would need something, whether it's like the banging of the heads or whether it's the way Walt's walking, his posture changes. If you really watch the film, you'll see the way Caleb and Holly work together in terms of changing just simple things like the way he crosses the space or the way he stands. His body changes as he realizes that everything is going under his feet. The ground is going.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's incredible. I don't think I can ever work without her again.
And yeah, Caleb Landry Jones, it seems again from what I've read that this project wouldn't have worked if you didn't have him on board, and that you were really nervous about whether he was going to accept it. And not only
Yeah.
does he star, he's part of the music as well. So yeah, I'm curious about that relationship and why that relationship was so key to you wanting to move forward with this
I
project.
mean, how many actors do you know of his generation? And it was important that he was a young guy. But how many actors do you know of his generation who would, accept to and by reading a script that's basically like a roadmap, um, that is they would play a character who basically spends the entire movie doing nothing. Like he doesn't act. It's all about him not being able to act upon the situation or with himself. The kind of genius passivity by which he graced this very graceless character. I find it so admirable, and the humble and very modest way by which he works. He disappears into his character. He doesn't ask anything of anyone. He just is. He gets into this. The Yeah. I mean, I don't have enough words to describe what a true actor, dedicated performer, artist he is. Also as a musician, he offered me, when I couldn't work with a composer that I wanted to work with from the beginning, because she was just not available at that point, because we went later with the shoot. Uh, he and my husband, Ian Hassett, they just said, we're going to do it. And Nicola Becker, our sound designer, who is also a musician and composer and works with handmade instruments. So because I always saw it as this sort of like folk science fiction film, bringing together synthesizers and all sorts of synths from, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, with handmade instruments from like Ghana or Japan, and bringing that together live over a course of 3 days in a recording studio in East London. It was really such a gift for me as a director. I'd never done this before. And having this experience of building the sound, usually there is the composer, the director. Many times they don't see eye to eye because suddenly the film changes, once you put the music. But it happened in such a tactile, organic way as a family, and it's called actually the Harvest Family Band.
Nice. Before we have to end, one of the things that I wanted to ask you um, is when we spoke back in 2011, I remember I asked you, I was like, why has it taken you so long to make another film, before, coming to Attenborough? And I think, it's a thing that's stuck in my head.
You asked me that then.
No, that's what I asked you then. And you completely schooled me and said, well, filmmaking isn't just being the director. It's all these other things. It's teaching, it's curating, it's it's reading your friend's script, it's cooking for them as you discuss ideas. And so, yeah, I mean, like, one, I wanted to thank you for that perspective. It's something that I come back to a lot and that I kind of cite a lot when people ask me about my favorite interviews that I've done. But two, I suppose, kind of where in the world of, all the roles of filmmaking, are you going next?
Teaching, which is always where I go back to in between films, because I find this so invigorating, and also it keeps me grounded. And I'm learning, so I myself go back to school because I have to. Also because I'm my whole I'm striving never to settle on a style. So I'm against style. So in order to do that, I just really have to school myself again and again. So it's definitely teaching, and then it's writing. So I'm writing something that's very, very, very different. That's taking me to quite introspective places, and it's the absolute opposite of harvest. So who knows? It might take another 10 years. It might take just a few weeks. I never know. I'm just always give it the time that it's needed, because I grew up in a country where you couldn't back then, you couldn't ever dream to be a female and a director or a filmmaker. This has really changed. And I consider my generation and our sort of like, the Greek New Wave, as it's called, as a kind of mini movement that really radicalized the filmmaking process in Greece, and it also radicalized females as producers, directors, writers, not just as traditionally editors and production managers, meaning housekeeping,
Yeah.
right? So this is part of my mission. So it's always going back to run workshops, to train new young producers, to undertake young filmmakers who need help with their films in a country that's being very ungenerous, to put it lightly,
Mhm.
with cinema.
Well, I look forward to seeing what you do next and what that next generation of filmmakers that you teach and bring up do next. Thank you so much for coming back to Directors
Thank you so
Notes.
much, Marbel. Thank you.